Margaret stood in her cozy but cluttered living room, gazing at a pile of unopened mail and knickknacks collected over the years. A pang of frustration tugged at her. How did life become so overwhelming? If you've ever felt like you're home, and mine could use a little more peace and order, you're not alone. In this journey, we'll explore 8 simple yet transformative habits to reclaim calm and clarity in your daily life. Ready to take the first step? Let's start by decluttering one small corner. 1. Declutter your space. Gradually, Margaret started small. Instead of tackling her entire house, she focused on one area, a single drawer. She set a timer for 15 minutes and gave herself permission to only sort what she could in that time. By the end, the drawer was tidy, and she felt a small but powerful sense of accomplishment. This gradual approach works because it breaks the overwhelming task into manageable chunks. Many seniors, like Margaret, feel emotionally tied to their belongings. The key isn't to discard everything, but to start with items that no longer serve a purpose. Maybe it's the chipped mug in the cabinet, or that stack of magazines from a decade ago. Each small success builds momentum. Margaret found it helpful to create 3 piles: keep, donate, and discard. With each item, she asked herself, does this add joy or value to my life? If not, it found a new home. Emotional benefits were immediate. Margaret noticed her anxiety easing as her physical space became lighter. A clutter-free home brought clarity to her mind, making her feel more in control. It wasn't just about organizing objects. It was about reclaiming peace. 2. Create a daily routine. Routine hadn't been a part of Margaret's life since she retired, and the lack of structure often left her feeling adrift. She decided to start small by adding simple, consistent rituals to her mornings and evenings. Every morning, Margaret brewed her favorite herbal tea, journaled 3 things she was grateful for, and stretched for 5 minutes. This grounding routine gave her a sense of purpose and energy to start her day. In the evenings, she found comfort in tidying her living space for 10 minutes, preparing her clothes for the next day, and enjoying a soothing audiobook before bed. These small habits weren't about rigid schedules. They were about adding a sense of rhythm and predictability to her life. Experts agree that routines can anchor us, especially as we age. For seniors, they offer emotional stability, reduce decision fatigue, and promote better sleep. Margaret began looking forward to these moments of self-care and reflection, and the positive changes in her mood were undeniable. If creating a routine feels daunting, start with one small habit at a time. Margaret's advice? Choose something you love, something that brings you joy. Build from there. 3. Find joy in simplifying. As Margaret started decluttering and building routines, she realized how much of her time and energy was consumed by unnecessary tasks. She often found herself overcommitting to events, even when she preferred quiet evenings at home. The turning point came when she decided to simplify her schedule. Margaret began by politely declining invitations she didn't genuinely want to accept. Instead of filling her calendar out of obligation, she reserved time for activities that truly mattered to her: reading, gardening, and spending time with her grandchildren. By focusing on fewer but more meaningful engagements, she felt more connected and fulfilled. One of Margaret's favorite tools became a simple weekly planner. Each Sunday, she reviewed her commitments and made sure her week reflected her priorities. She left intentional gaps in her schedule for relaxation and unexpected joys. The emotional impact was profound. Margaret no longer felt stretched thin or guilty for saying no. Simplifying her schedule allowed her to be fully present for the moments that mattered most. For anyone hesitant to simplify, Margaret offers this advice: your time is precious. Spend it on what truly nourishes your soul. 4. Practice mindfulness. One afternoon, while sitting on her porch with a cup of tea, Margaret felt restless. Her mind raced through worries about her family, her unfinished chores, and even the years slipping by. That's when a memory surfaced, a friend once telling her about mindfulness. Intrigued, Margaret decided to give it a try. Mindfulness, she learned, is simply being present in the moment without judgment. She started small by paying attention to her breath. Inhalation for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhalation for 4. This simple exercise became a lifeline during stressful moments. Margaret also practiced mindfulness during her daily walks. Instead of replaying past regrets or future worries, she focused on the crunch of leaves underfoot, the warmth of the sun on her face, and the sound of birds chirping. These small moments brought her back to the present, grounding her in a way she hadn't felt in years. The benefits were life-changing. Margaret found herself less anxious and more at peace, even on challenging days. Her newfound mindfulness also helped her focus better on tasks, making her feel productive and in control. If you're new to mindfulness, remember, it's not about perfection. Even a few seconds of being fully present can make a world of difference. Margaret often said, "It's not about emptying your mind. It's about giving yourself the grace to breathe." 5. Simplify your surroundings. Margaret had always prided herself on being hospitable. Her home was filled with heirlooms, gifts from friends, and decorations for every season. But as she started to clear her space, she realized that many items were more burdensome than meaningful. One day, while sorting through her linen closet, Margaret came across stacks of mismatched towels. Some were torn, others discolored. She hesitated. What if she needed them someday? Then she paused and thought about her goals: simplicity and peace. Margaret kept the best towels and donated the rest. It felt like a small step, but the cleared space made her feel lighter. Margaret also learned to let go of items that no longer brought her joy. A chipped vase from an old trip, for instance, reminded her of a wonderful memory, but she realized the memory didn't depend on keeping the vase. She took a photo of it and donated it, finding joy in the space it freed. To simplify, start with what's manageable. Margaret suggests tackling one small area, your bedside table, for instance. Clear it of anything that doesn't contribute to restful sleep or joy. As Margaret simplified, she noticed her home becoming a sanctuary, not just a space. Each cleared corner brought a sense of calm, and she found it easier to relax and focus on the things that truly mattered. 6. Build your support network. Even with her progress, there were days when Margaret felt lonely. Her grown children visited occasionally, and her friends were scattered across town. She realized that while simplifying her surroundings brought peace, true joy came from connecting with others. Margaret decided to reach out to an old friend she hadn't spoken to in years. They started with a phone call, reminiscing about shared memories, and soon scheduled regular coffee dates. Reconnecting brought warmth and companionship to her life. She also joined a local seniors group that hosted weekly gatherings. At first, she was hesitant, unsure if she would fit in. But Margaret quickly discovered a community of like-minded women who shared her struggles and triumphs. These connections became her lifeline, offering laughter, support, and encouragement. Margaret's advice to others: don't be afraid to take the first step. Whether it's joining a local club, reconnecting with a friend, or even exploring online groups, there's a world of people who share your journey. The emotional impact was profound. Margaret found herself smiling more, laughing often, and feeling truly seen and valued. "We're not meant to go through life alone," she often said. "Sometimes, peace comes from the company of those who understand us." 7. Create a weekly organization plan. One Sunday morning, Margaret sat at her dining table with a cup of coffee and an empty notebook. Inspired by a suggestion from a friend, she decided to map out her week in advance. At first, the task felt daunting. Where to start? But with a little patience, Margaret found a rhythm that worked. She divided her days into simple categories: household tasks, personal time, and social activities. Instead of cramming her schedule, she allotted time for only a few tasks each day, leaving space for relaxation and spontaneity. Mondays became her kitchen day, when she'd sort through the pantry or plan meals. Wednesdays were dedicated to errands, and Fridays became her favorite, self-care day. This weekly plan acted as her compass, helping her stay on track without feeling overwhelmed. She also started using sticky notes for smaller reminders, placing them in visible spots like the fridge or her bedroom mirror. The emotional benefits were immediate. Margaret felt a newfound sense of control and calm. She no longer woke up wondering what needed to be done or feeling anxious about forgotten tasks. Her week had structure, but it also had balance, a combination that left her feeling accomplished and at peace. If you're considering this habit, Margaret suggests starting small. Begin by planning 1 or 2 key tasks for each day, and remember to leave room for yourself. You deserve to enjoy your days, she often reminded herself, and now she reminds you too. 8. Incorporate light exercise. Margaret had always thought of exercise as something daunting. Hours at a gym, or exhausting routines that left her sore for days. But one afternoon, while flipping through a magazine, she read about the benefits of gentle movement for seniors. Intrigued, she decided to try something new. Her first step? A simple walk around her neighborhood. She laced up her sneakers, put on her favorite scarf, and stepped outside. At first, she felt awkward and self-conscious, but as she walked, she noticed the way the crisp air cleared her mind and the sunlight warmed her skin. Encouraged by how she felt, Margaret added more activities to her routine. She discovered a yoga video for seniors on YouTube and followed along from her living room. The slow stretches eased the tension in her shoulders and back, and the calming music helped her feel centered. Exercise quickly became a source of joy rather than a chore. Margaret didn't just feel stronger, she felt more connected to her body and more energetic in her daily life. Tasks that once seemed tiring, like carrying groceries or gardening, became easier and even enjoyable. If you're hesitant to begin, Margaret offers this advice. Start where you are. Even 5 minutes of movement can make a difference. Whether it's a walk around the block, chair yoga, or dancing to your favorite song in the kitchen, find an activity that makes you smile. 9. Establish a gratitude practice. On a quiet evening, Margaret sat by the window with her journal. It had been a busy week, and she felt a little overwhelmed. Then, she remembered something she'd heard in her senior group. Gratitude is the quickest path to peace. She decided to give it a try. Margaret opened her journal and wrote down 3 things she was grateful for: her warm cup of tea, the sound of rain tapping on the window, and the laughter she'd shared with her neighbor earlier that day. As she wrote, a wave of calm washed over her. Over time, this nightly gratitude practice became a cherished ritual. No matter how the day had gone, Margaret found something to be thankful for: a kind word, a favorite meal, or the simple fact that she'd made it through another day. Research shows that gratitude can improve mental health, reduce stress, and even enhance sleep quality. Margaret's experience was no different. She noticed herself focusing less on what was missing in her life and more on what was abundant. Her advice? Start small. You don't need a fancy journal or long lists, just a quiet moment and a willingness to reflect. It's amazing how much light gratitude can bring into your life, Margaret said, smiling as she closed her journal one evening. 10. Connect with others regularly. In a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Margaret found herself scrolling through old photo albums. She smiled at the faces of friends and family, but also felt a pang of loneliness. She realized that while her gratitude practice had brought her inner peace, her heart longed for more connection. Margaret decided to make an intentional effort to reconnect with loved ones. She started by calling her granddaughter, who was thrilled to hear from her. They chatted about school, hobbies, and life, and by the end of the call, Margaret's spirits were lifted. She also began attending a monthly book club at her local library. Initially, she felt nervous about meeting new people, but she quickly discovered that many others shared her feelings. The conversations were lively, and the friendships she formed became a source of joy and support. Connecting with others, whether through a phone call, a shared hobby, or a community group, brings more than just companionship. It fosters a sense of belonging. Margaret noticed that the more she engaged with others, the more resilient and optimistic she felt. Her advice is simple: reach out, even if it feels a little uncomfortable at first. The connections you create can brighten your life in ways you never imagined. 11th, let go of perfection. One of Margaret's most profound lessons came from an unlikely source: a slightly crooked cake. She had baked it for her senior group's potluck and fretted over its uneven layers and less than perfect icing. But when she arrived, her friends were delighted, praising the taste and the effort she'd put into it. It was a pivotal moment. Margaret realized how much time she'd spent over the years chasing perfection, in her home, her appearance, and even her relationships. She began to see that striving for perfection often led to unnecessary stress and disappointment. From that day forward, Margaret embraced the idea of good enough. She allowed herself to leave a dish unwashed overnight if she was tired, or skip dusting every corner during her weekly cleaning. The world didn't end, and she felt lighter for letting go. For many seniors, perfectionism is a lifelong habit, often tied to the desire to maintain control. Margaret's story reminds us that life doesn't need to be perfect to be beautiful. Focus on what matters, she advises, and let the rest go. 12. Celebrate your achievements. As Margaret reflected on her journey, she realized how far she'd come. From feeling overwhelmed by clutter and stress, she had built habits that brought her peace and joy. But one thing was missing. She wasn't acknowledging her progress. Margaret decided to celebrate her achievements, big and small. After completing her weekly organization plan, she treated herself to her favorite chocolate. When she finished a decluttering project, she rewarded herself with a bouquet of fresh flowers. These small celebrations became a way to honor her efforts and stay motivated. Recognizing your achievements, no matter how minor they may seem, is an essential part of the journey. It reinforces positive habits and builds confidence. Margaret found that by celebrating her progress, she felt more inspired to keep going. She also began sharing her successes with her senior group. They cheered her on, and hearing their encouragement made her accomplishments feel even more meaningful. Don't wait for someone else to celebrate you, Margaret says. Be your own biggest cheerleader. 13. Embrace nature. Margaret had always loved her garden, but over the years, her visits became infrequent. One morning, inspired by her gratitude practice, she decided to spend time outdoors. She slipped on her gardening gloves and stepped into her backyard, where a quiet world of blooming flowers and chirping birds awaited her. As she pulled weeds and planted new bulbs, Margaret felt a sense of calm wash over her. The rhythmic motion of her hands, the smell of freshly turned earth, and the warmth of the sun brought her a deep sense of connection. Research shows that spending time in nature reduces stress, lowers blood pressure, and enhances mood. For Margaret, it became a daily ritual, a walk in the park, sitting by a lake, or simply tending to her plants. Each moment in nature reminded her of life's simple beauty. Her advice to others: Step outside, even if it's just for a few minutes. Let nature remind you of its quiet strength and endless renewal. Whether it's a garden, a park bench, or a patch of sky viewed through a window, connecting with the natural world can bring immense peace. 14. Reflect on your legacy. One evening, while sorting through old letters and photographs, Margaret found herself reflecting on her life. She thought about the lessons she'd learned, the relationships she'd nurtured, and the memories she cherished. This reflection wasn't just nostalgic, it was deeply grounding. Margaret decided to write a letter to her grandchildren, sharing her wisdom and favorite stories. It was a deeply personal act, one that filled her with pride and purpose. She realized that her life wasn't just a collection of days, but a meaningful journey that could inspire others. Reflecting on your legacy doesn't mean dwelling on the past. It's about finding ways to honor your experiences and share them with others. Whether through journaling, storytelling, or simply sharing a conversation, these reflections help you connect with your purpose and value. Your story matters, Margaret often said. Don't be afraid to share it. You never know whose life you might touch. 15. Celebrate life's small moments. Margaret had a habit of lighting a candle each evening as she read her book. It was a small gesture, but it marked the end of her day with warmth and intention. She began to see these little rituals as celebrations of life's small moments, moments that were often overlooked in the rush of daily life. From savoring her morning tea to pausing to watch the sunset, Margaret learned to find joy in the ordinary. These small moments became her anchors, grounding her in gratitude and reminding her that peace often comes from the simplest things. Celebrating small moments doesn't require grand gestures. It's about being present and allowing yourself to fully experience life's quiet joys. Margaret often said, "Life's beauty is in the details. Don't miss them." If you're feeling overwhelmed, start by identifying one small thing that brings you happiness. A favorite song, a cherished keepsake, or even the smell of fresh flowers. Make time for these moments and let them fill your days with light. So, what do you think? Ready to tackle your days like the peaceful, organized rock star you are? These 8 habits aren't just tips. They're your ticket to a calmer mind, a happier home, and more me time than you've had in years. Try them, love them, and tell us your wins below.